breath. Single dad answered the door, excited for his date. Then she whispered, "My kids are outside." It had been weeks since he had time for anything that wasn't work or taking care of his kids. Bray. He loved them with all his heart, but sometimes he missed the simple joy of adult conversations, of quiet moments just for himself. As a single parent, finding time to connect with anyone outside of his children seemed impossible. But tonight was different. He had arranged for a trusted friend to watch over the kids, and he had a date planned. It wasn't much, just a casual dinner, but it felt like a big deal after so many months of staying at home. He had been looking forward to it all week, counting down the hours. He stood in front of the mirror, straightening his shirt, brushing off the tiny crumbs from his pants, and even giving his hair a quick run-through with his hand. He wanted to look his best. He wanted to feel confident. After all, it wasn't every day he had the chance to go out and enjoy the company of someone new. He checked his watch. She was on time, and she was probably at the door right now. His heart skipped a beat as he heard the doorbell ring. He took a deep breath and walked over to answer it. When he opened the door, he was greeted with a warm smile, and for a moment, everything seemed perfect. He had no idea what to expect, but he could tell from the friendly look in her eyes that the night might just be the escape he had been hoping for. She was standing there, dressed casually, yet still looking good. Brusque. He noticed the way her smile seemed genuine, as if she was as eager to meet him as he was to meet her. This was the moment he had been waiting for. Inspiration. "Hi," he said, trying to sound casual, though his voice betrayed his excitement. She smiled back, but there was something about her expression that made him hesitate for just a second. It was a small moment, almost imperceptible, but he could see a hint of uncertainty in her eyes. "Hi," she said softly. "I'm so glad we could meet up tonight." There was a pause. The door was still open between them, and the cool evening air brushed past them. But she wasn't stepping inside. "Friend." His end turned to Tar, her hands fiddling with the strap of her bag. He could sense there was something she wasn't saying. She took a step forward, then glanced up at him, her voice soft but clear. "My kids are outside." The words hung in the air for a moment, and he blinked, trying to process what she just said. His heart dropped for a split second. What did she mean? Was she waiting for him to invite her children in? Was there some mix-up? He didn't know what to say at first. He hadn't expected this. He had imagined the evening would just be the two of them, a simple chance to relax. But now it seemed like things had taken a turn, one he didn't quite understand. The confusion must have shown on his face because she quickly explained, "I didn't want to bring them in right away. I figured I'd just make sure things felt okay with you first. They're in the car, just waiting." He blinked again, his brain trying to catch up with the situation. She had kids. He didn't even know. They hadn't talked about it, hadn't mentioned that her children would be involved. For a second, he didn't know how to respond. He felt like he was in the middle of an unexpected situation that could either end awkwardly or turn into something more meaningful. His thoughts swirled for a moment as he thought about the implications. She must have seen the uncertainty in his face because she quickly added, "I didn't want to disrupt the evening or make things awkward." He tried to shake off the surprise and forced a smile. "It's okay," he said, trying to sound more comfortable. "You're more than welcome to bring them inside if you want. We can keep it low-key. It's not a problem." There was a slight hesitation from her, a moment where she seemed to wrestle with the idea. But then she nodded, her smile returning a little more confidently. "Okay," she said, her voice filled with relief. I'd really appreciate it. As soon as she stepped inside, he could sense the change in the atmosphere. This wasn't just a casual date between two strangers anymore. It was a glimpse into the reality of being a parent, and how complicated it could get. He knew he was stepping into uncharted waters, but he was trying his best to keep it together. She stood in the doorway for a moment, as though waiting for him to lead the way, before he stepped aside and let her in fully. She hesitated for a second before she added, I didn't want you to feel like this was going to be too much. It's just that my kids, they mean the world to me. He nodded, now fully understanding the gravity of the situation. Being a parent wasn't easy, and he could relate. The bond between a parent and their children was powerful, and it seemed like she was simply doing her best to navigate through it all. The sounds of footsteps outside were the first sign that the kids had finally made their way to the door. He turned around to see two small faces peeking around the corner, their eyes wide with curiosity. A boy, probably around 8 years old, and a girl who looked to be a few years younger. They stood there, hesitant but not shy, waiting for a signal from their mother. Hey, come on in, he said with a warm smile, trying to make the kids feel welcome. He could tell they were unsure, just like he had been moments ago. But he didn't want them to feel like they were intruding. The boy took a step forward, his sister following closely behind. Their eyes darted around the room, taking in their surroundings while their mother crouched down to their level. She spoke to them in a soft tone, reassuring them that everything was fine. After a few moments, the kids relaxed and began to wander further into the house. The tension in the room eased, and they quickly started to feel more at home. It was strange, but the situation was slowly shifting from what he had thought would be a private date to something more communal, something a little more real. Frowned and desperate. The boy, now a little more comfortable, asked, Can we play video games while you talk? His sister nodded enthusiastically, already scanning the living room for the TV remote. He chuckled, surprised at how easily the kids had settled in. Sure, go ahead, he said, giving them a small nod. It wasn't what he had envisioned for the evening, but the kids seemed happy, and honestly, that made him feel good. She smiled at him, looking slightly embarrassed, but also grateful for his easy acceptance. Thank you for being so understanding, she said. I really didn't want to overstep by bringing them in. I just didn't know how you'd feel about it. He shrugged, offering her a reassuring smile. Honestly, it's fine. I have kids too. Desperate. They sat down in the living room, where he had already set up a casual dinner for them. X! The kids were more than happy to settle into the game they had started, and before long the tension that had hung in the air earlier was gone. As they ate, they talked about their kids, their lives, and the struggles they had faced as single parents. He learned more about her than he expected that night, and vice versa. They spoke about the balancing act of raising kids and still trying to hold on to something resembling a social life. But it was nice. It was real. The evening that had started out with confusion and surprise had transformed into something meaningful, something that went beyond the idea of a simple date. It felt like an authentic connection was being made. Even with the kids in the room, something had clicked between them, and though it wasn't perfect, it felt good. By the end of the night, as the kids were getting ready to leave, she looked at him with gratitude. I didn't think this would go so well. Thank you for being so open. He smiled, feeling a genuine warmth towards her. It was a good night. Let's do this again sometime. The evening had unfolded in a way that was completely different from what he had imagined. What had started as a simple date between two adults had turned into a more complex situation, with the presence of her kids creating a unique dynamic. He hadn't expected to spend the evening with kids running around and asking questions. But there was something comforting about it. There was a warmth in the house that wasn't there before, a sort of ease that came from the children's laughter and the casual, unplanned nature of the evening. As he watched the kids play video games in the corner of the room, he found himself reflecting on his own children, who weren't around tonight. He thought about the way they would have reacted in a similar situation. He loved them with all his heart, but there were times when he longed for a break, a night where it was just him, away from the never-ending demands of fatherhood. Yet here he was, sitting across from a woman who understood those demands all too well. Rest. She was a mother, and she knew what it was like to juggle responsibilities while still trying to maintain some semblance of a personal life. He couldn't help but admire her for being so open about her situation. It wasn't easy to mix parenting with dating, but she had made the choice to go for it anyway. It felt like they were both learning something new tonight. "So, how do you manage it all?" he asked, his voice soft, trying to keep the conversation going despite the noisy kids in the background. "I mean, raising kids on your own, while also finding time to be with someone, that's gotta be tough." She looked at him for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "There are days when I feel like I'm barely holding it together. You know, the pressure to be a good parent and also have a life of my own. It's hard not to feel like you're failing sometimes. But then, I remind myself that I'm doing the best I can. That's all we can do, right?" He nodded, a sense of understanding passing between them. "I try to do the same for my kids. It's hard to balance everything, especially when you don't have much time for yourself." The room fell into a quiet pause as they both reflected on the challenges of being parents. The laughter from the kids in the corner seemed to fill the silence, reminding them that life, while difficult at times, could still be joyful. After a while, the kids finished their game, and she excused herself to check on them. He watched as she knelt down beside them, asking about their game, giving them each a quick hug before returning to him. It was a small moment, but it told him a lot about her character. She was devoted to her children, but she was also present, engaged in the moment. It wasn't easy to be that way when juggling everything else in life, but she was doing it. "You're doing a great job," he said, his words more genuine than he realized. She looked at him with a soft smile, her eyes full of gratitude. "It means a lot to hear that." The night continued on with a surprising ease. The kids were settled in, playing quietly together while they talked about everything from parenting struggles to the small joys of everyday life. There was no pressure to impress each other, or make the evening feel like something it wasn't. It was just two people, connecting over shared experiences and simple moments. It was real, and that felt more meaningful than anything else. As they finished their meal, the conversation drifted to their pasts. They talked about where they grew up, their families, and what they dreamed of for the future. She admitted that she sometimes felt like she had put her own dreams on hold for so long, focusing solely on raising her kids. But now, after all this time, she was beginning to wonder if there was still a place for those dreams in her life.
"I used to love painting," she said, her voice tinged with nostalgia.
"I haven't picked up a brush in years. But I think about it sometimes, you know? Bration. What it would feel like to just create something again. Something just for me." He smiled, nodding. "I get that." "I used to have hobbies, too. I don't remember the last time I had time for them. But it's nice to think that maybe, someday, I'll be able to pick them back up." There was something deeply human about their conversation. It wasn't about impressing one another or putting on a show. It was about the small, often unnoticed things that made them who they were. They were two people who had lived through their own struggles, found themselves in the chaos of parenthood, and were now trying to find a little piece of themselves again. As the evening came to a close, he couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment he hadn't expected. The night had started off with such uncertainty, and yet here they were, both in a place of understanding and connection. It wasn't the perfect date he had envisioned, but it felt real, and that was more than he could have asked for. Breath. The kids were getting sleepy, their little bodies curled up on the couch, drifting off to the soft sounds of the television. She gently woke them up, telling them it was time to head home. They both groggily nodded, still clutching their game controllers. But they didn't protest. They were used to the routine. "Thank you for tonight," she said as she gathered her things. Breaths. "I wasn't sure what to expect, but I really enjoyed this." "I wasn't sure how things would go with the kids being here, but you made it feel so natural."
He smiled, standing up to help her with her things. It was a good night. I'm glad we did this.
As they made their way to the door, the kids slowly followed, still sleepy, but holding on to their mother's hand. She bent down to give them both a kiss on the forehead, whispering something only they could hear. It was a moment that showed just how much she loved them, how much she cared. And even though he wasn't part of that world, he could see it in her actions. It was clear that her children were her world, and they were her top priority. She turned back to him, a gentle smile on her face. "Brash. I know this wasn't what you expected, but thank you for making it so easy. You're a good person, Grace." He nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest. "It was my pleasure." As she and the kids walked out the door, he stood there for a moment, reflecting on the evening. It had been a surprise, to say the least, but he realized that sometimes the best moments in life weren't the ones you planned for. They were the ones that just happened, the ones that felt honest and real. The door clicked shut behind him, and he stood there, feeling a sense of contentment. Maybe it hadn't been the perfect evening, but it had been something much more valuable. It had been genuine, a connection that wasn't based on expectations or false pretenses. It had been real. As he cleaned up the remnants of dinner, he thought about what might come next. Would they see each other again? He wasn't sure, but he knew that whatever happened, he had taken a step forward. He had opened himself up to something new, something real. And that, he thought, was enough for tonight. He smiled to himself as he finished washing the dishes. It was a quiet, simple moment, but in it, he found something important. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something more. The days that followed the unexpected date night seemed to blend together, but something had changed inside him. The evening had been much different than anything he had imagined, and yet it felt like a turning point. The uncertainty that had clouded the night, the surprise of her children joining them, had somehow turned into a warm, familiar memory. It wasn't a perfect night, but it had been real, more real than anything he had experienced in a long time. He hadn't heard from her since that night, but he wasn't worried. They had agreed to keep in touch, to take things slow, and he respected that. Parenting, after all, came with its own set of complexities, and he didn't want to rush anything. It had been refreshing to talk to someone who truly understood the ups and downs of life as a single parent. She didn't have to pretend to be someone else. She was just herself. And that was what had made the evening so unexpectedly meaningful. A few days after their meeting, he found himself thinking about the way she had handled the whole situation. Her calm and collected manner, even when things didn't go as planned, was something he admired. She hadn't let her kids' presence become an obstacle. Instead, she had made it part of the experience. He couldn't help but think that there was a lot he could learn from that approach. It wasn't easy, being a single parent. There were always so many things to juggle: work, kids, responsibilities, and yet somehow she had made it all look so natural. There was a certain grace in the way she balanced everything, a grace he hadn't expected to find. It reminded him that while single parenthood might come with its struggles, it also came with its own rewards. He was reminded of the joy he had in his own children's laughter, the moments when they'd play together, or even the quiet moments of comfort in their shared presence. Breath. These were the things that made everything worthwhile. He decided to reach out. He hadn't expected to hear from her so soon, but he felt a sense of longing to see how she was doing. He had a feeling that there was more to this story, more to the connection they had started. So he sent a simple message, asking how she was doing, and if she would like to grab a coffee sometime soon. It wasn't anything major, just a friendly gesture, but he genuinely wanted to know how she was. To his surprise, she responded almost immediately. She seemed just as eager to continue their connection, and before long, they were making plans to meet again. They talked about everything: their children, their routines, their hopes for the future. It was comfortable, easy, like they had known each other for much longer than just a few days. They met at a small cafe in the corner of the city, a cozy place that was quiet enough to have a conversation without interruptions. As soon as she walked in, he noticed how much more at ease she seemed. The last time they had met, there had been a certain formality to their interaction, a hesitance that had come from the unexpected turn the evening had taken. But now, it felt different. The tension was gone. They had shared a moment of understanding already, and that made everything feel more natural. He smiled as she sat down across from him, her face lighting up in recognition. There was something so simple, yet so comfortable, about the way she made him feel. They talked about everything, about their kids, their past experiences, the ups and downs of dating as a single parent. She told him about the struggles she had faced, about the challenges of raising 2 children on her own. But it wasn't all heavy. They laughed about the little things, like how her kids never seemed to want to go to bed on time, or how he had once tried to bake cookies and ended up with a kitchen full of flour. Deuced. It was nice to share these little anecdotes, these everyday moments, and it felt like they were getting closer. They shared stories about their kids, exchanging parenting tips and agreeing on how difficult it could be to balance everything. But even in those difficult moments, they both recognized the beauty of parenthood. They both understood how special the little things could be. The smile of a child, their innocent laughter, their sense of wonder at the world around them. It was clear they both found fulfillment in their children, despite the exhaustion and stress that came with it. As the evening went on, he found himself looking at her in a new light. There was something magnetic about her, something he hadn't fully realized the first time they met. She wasn't just a single mother trying to make it work. She was strong, kind, and deeply caring. She had a quiet strength that came from her dedication to her children and her ability to navigate the challenges of life with grace. She wasn't afraid to show vulnerability, yet she held her head high, proud of the person she had become. He realized that, in many ways, they were more alike than he had first thought. They both carried the weight of responsibility, but they also carried the joy of being parents. They both knew the value of patience, of understanding, and of giving their best to the ones they loved. It was a rare connection, one that didn't need to be rushed or forced. It was something that could grow naturally in its own time. As they said goodbye that evening, he couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. It wasn't just about the possibility of something romantic. It was about finding someone who understood him, someone who shared his experiences and values. It was about connecting with someone who didn't judge him for his past, who didn't expect perfection, but who was willing to build something real, something lasting. "Thank you for tonight," she said as she got into her car, her eyes soft with sincerity. "But it feels good to talk to someone who really gets it." He smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. "I feel the same way. Let's do this again soon." As she drove off, he stood there for a moment, watching her car disappear into the night. He felt a quiet contentment, a sense of peace that had been missing for a long time. Like, it wasn't just about the evening or the potential for a future together. It was about the simple, honest connection they had shared. He walked back to his own car, his heart light. Life as a single parent wasn't always easy, but it was moments like these that made it worthwhile. He had found someone who understood the complexities of life, who wasn't afraid of the messiness of it all. And maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something new, a connection that could turn into something meaningful. As he drove home that evening, he thought about his kids and how they had been the reason he had even met her in the first place. It was funny how life worked out sometimes, how a simple date night could turn into something much more. Maybe, just maybe, the best things in life came when you least expected them. And as he pulled into his driveway, he smiled. He was ready for whatever came next.